Hello and welcome to Understanding Narcissists. Thank you so much for joining me. In this episode, I want to extrapolate further on a video I did previously about narcissists and their relationships. It was just a few videos ago. And the point I made in that video, I believe, was basically all you can learn and all you can garner by way of experience, for the most part, about a narcissist before you experience them fully. All the little signs and indicators that you can pick up on when you know more about them without having to go through the ringer, without having to go through years of abuse and trauma. Because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about a time span of years of your life with these people. That's really what they take from you, and so much more, but at least putting it to a time scale. Years, decades. And I want to go further into that topic because it really hints at sort of a mental architecture, their kind of mental world, and how it's expressed in the external world. Now, of course, this is true of everybody. But fortunately, because of narcissists' own shortcomings, they're not terribly aware of it. You can always pick up on it by what they do. And so how I like to think of it is, if you look at what I've been doing for the most part on this channel, what I do is I try to go in their mind. I try to find the little sort of sprigs or shoots that kind of come out of them, that kind of spring forth, and then I trace that back to their minds and try to attempt to sort of correlate everything and explain what they're doing by what they have done, what they're thinking, what they're going through in order to act in the way that they do. So that kind of triangulating, it's kind of the first thing that comes to mind when you try to understand narcissists, or anybody for that matter. It's almost common sense or instinctual. But it's also come to my attention that you needn't sit and pontificate so much and try to connect every piece of, say, their actual behavior, what they do, and then what's going on in their minds. That's hard. That's tenuous. That's a difficult thing to do because they're very well hidden. Well, it came to my mind that when you look at their lives for what it is, the external world kind of paints a much better picture, at least initially. I'm not saying you're going to know every single thing about them, but there's a lot of small details that their relationships tell you about their mind, that you don't even need to do what I've been doing for the most part, though I do think it's enormously beneficial and you have to do it at some point, not least of which is it's usually the first thing that comes to mind. But a lot of times you can remain external and look at just under a microscope their own lives. Don't even think about what's going on in their heads. Just look at what they do and all the people in their lives, the decisions they make, the things they think about. And when I say think about, obviously I mean the things that they actually seem to express to you and then carry out. It's not that there aren't plenty of things that they do and they think about that they don't tell you. It's just that a lot of it, even what's visible, even when it's show, it all goes together. It's all kind of a physical expression and manifestation of what's going on in their minds. And while that sounds kind of soupy and silly, I've been surprised, repeatedly surprised, and sometimes blown away how well it works. The only shortcoming with that way of thinking is that it is limited to your own kind of detective skills and observational skills, and I do think it helps to understand or have some kind of understanding narcissists at the get-go without being biased per se or having to know too much about them. If you're somebody who's grown up with them and been around them your whole lives, then it's almost second nature to you. You just come to expect it. And when you're looking at them from the outside and try to detach your understanding and your expectations of what you know they do, and just look at what they do. It gives you a fresh insight, because they really are their actions are a candid expression of what's going on inside. And that's what I alluded to in the relationships. Now, the relationships are kind of a cornerstone. They're as big as anything. Narcissists are people-oriented. I guess, hopefully, we're all people-oriented to some degree, but narcissists are people-dependent, and they're egocentric, and it's just all connected, all bundled up, and they're inseparable. That being what it is, relationships naturally occupy a particular cornerstone. But there are other things. And this one seems minor, but have you ever noticed that narcissists are never particularly attached to anything? Everything is junk worthy. Everything can be dispensable. A home, for instance, they're never attached to anything in particular. I'm not saying even material attachment, it's the sentimental value. People often have some kind of attachment to their homes. There's an emotional sort of connection there. And that doesn't mean that everybody's like that and you should be like that, and if you're not, there's something wrong with you. It's just that narcissists, I don't think I've ever seen it. They see the home as a hub of control, as a station that has to be theirs and they have to own at all times, but they don't care for it. It doesn't really matter. They don't have a home. It's just wherever their people are and how they can herd and direct and manipulate their people. That is another thing that when you look on the outside is, when people are detached from any kind of influence or factor in their decision making that you would regard as sentimental. They just don't care. Now, you could just say it's a lack of empathy. And I guess, maybe I'm talking too much. Maybe it does ultimately boil down to that. Or there's simply a lack of relationships. There's simply a lack of any kind of formative bond with anyone or anything. And it's interesting to note, too, that just like when you talk to a narcissist and they have a superficial layer and a face that they show everybody, and even you, that you will believe initially, there's this other layer. Well, just like in their behavior, almost like a house, there's things that they do, actions, and again, they don't do it in great abundance because they only do it enough so that people believe, because you need to maintain that image. There are behaviors that they'll engage in that they'll do just enough to look a certain way. There's the words part of it, and then there's the actions. And with the actions, it can be, doing enough, say, yard work is one that I've seen before. Narcissists like to look like they're busy and they're active and they're doing all these things and they're working on something because, by and large, in suburbia, it is looked upon in a positive way. And I've seen that time and time again with narcissists. It's an external thing. It's the exterior. And it's like, see, that's the action representation where, wow. And it kind of fools you too, because you think, wow, they're really doing that. How could I be so suspicious of them? Why would I think that they could be as dangerous as they are if there's all these clear contradictions to that conclusion, to the idea that they're actually narcissists? Well, it's just a minor set. It's just to throw you off. It's a setback, if anything, but it's not actually a real conclusion. It's part of that superficial layer, that exterior that's fooling you and everybody else. Now, as you get experience with them, they can still trick you with things. They still have a lot of other things in their bag of tricks in their playbook, but you will get by that pretty quickly. But when you're on the outside, that position, that's clearly, at least to me, I like to see it, a behavioral representation of what's going on in their minds. There are all those layers, or all those things. How about when they engage in certain behaviors that are clearly contradictory and they don't seem to be aware of it? At the get-go, you assume, well, they're just manipulating me, they're just trying to fool me. But sometimes they actually do things because they're compartmentalized. They will do things that are the exact opposite of what they're trying to achieve and that set them back. Now, this is a different topic that is very speculative, but I've seen it's kind of like the inner mind of the narcissist is kind of what I call it. That sort of area of with all the layers and the contradictions. And I don't know how to sort that out because I'm not in their head, so I don't really know. And they don't seem to be fully aware of it either. So that's when it gets really difficult and you kind of become an armchair philosopher at that point. But it's still worthy to go into, and I'll probably do it in a different video. But those kinds of things where they're clearly working against themselves and you're going, why? Why is that the case? Why is that enormous conflict there within them in the first place? And I got to be honest, I feel like I see it in things when they're trying to accomplish something that requires some kind of physical action, some kind of deliberation and planning, and it falls apart repeatedly. They're not aware that they're shortchanging themselves. They're not aware that they only allow themselves to reach a certain level. Either they're too scared or they're incapable of, they're scared of failure, or they're scared that they're incompetent, or whatever it is. That's there. It's clear in their language. It's clear in their thought. As much as you can discern, from when they're lying, when they're telling the truth, but also in their day-to-day stuff, how inefficient they can be, how wholly ineffective. And you ask yourself, why? Because it's not immediately clear. It's not clear why that is the case. Seeing their actions as a physical manifestation of their internal architecture, their mental architecture, what they're experiencing inside, and how they go about doing things day to day, their day-to-day behavior, implementing when they're trying to accomplish something. There's a big connection there, and it can give you a leg up in your understanding, especially earlier on, because it's something that's a little more concrete than the things that I talk about where I just attempt to extrapolate all I can from little things that you see, like sort of the conflicts that you engage them, or I guess I should say they engage you with, they come at you with, all that mixture of feelings in your experience, and then trying to follow up thinking, what's going on with them, this pattern of behavior, what's going on, then you try to delve into their mind. Well, sometimes it's right in front of you to begin with. You just have to be able to look for it. You just have to see all those connections, because they're pretty good at hiding it, but they're not masterful. There's always things that fall through the cracks, and often they're big things. You're able to spot them because they often have an assumption too where there's a time when they assume people aren't watching them, people aren't looking. But you are. They assume they can trick you into overlooking their actions, but you can still look at it and piece it together and reach conclusions that would be otherwise difficult if you didn't look at what they were doing all the time. I hope this video didn't have too much verbiage. Like this video. If you do, share it with somebody you think might benefit from it. Comment in the comment section below on what you think, how you reach your own conclusions about narcissists and piece things together. What sort of lines of thinking have worked for you, and if this is anything that you think is valuable or has any practical use, or if it's just completely useless. Either way, I appreciate your input. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.